So we're talking today about 3.6 adulthood. It's the last piece we're going to talk about with with Unit 3, developmental psychology. So we're moving on from adolescence and emerging adulthood into young, middle, and late stages of adulthood. So physical changes. Try not to start crying right now as the body begins to decline in the mid to late 20s. I can absolutely attest to this as a 30-year-old. All of my abilities have rapidly deteriorated in the last 2 to 3 years. I really thought that life is amazing. I was 27, turned 28, and it was just like, why does it hurt to get out of bed now? But here we are. Muscular strength, reaction time, cardiac output, all of that slowly begins to drop off. It's not precipitously. I'm over exaggerating a little bit. But in general, it begins at that stage, right? We're peaking in most of our physical abilities in our late 20s. And this is true for most. I mean, if we think about like athletes, right? Most of like great athletes, right, really peak in their late 20s, right, because they pair off experience with physical abilities. And then it's usually impressive to see someone like Tom Brady playing into their 40s, right, because they're fighting against their kind of bodily clock, which is slowly losing abilities, at least physical abilities, even if it's maintaining and even sharpening mental abilities. It's oftentimes why more cerebral positions like quarterback or things like even marathon running, we see strength and peaking later in life, right? Even into mid 30s. The fastest marathon runners are often in their young to mid 30s because it's such a mental game as well as a physical thing, right? You need to be able to have that mental strength that takes more time to develop. In middle and late adulthood, we start to see fertility decline. That's in men and women. And then for women specifically, stages of menopause where they will no longer be able to bear children. And as a whole, sexual activity lessens, sexual drives lessen as well, but don't ever entirely go away. Into late adulthood, we see a little bit more significant drop-offs in muscle strength, reaction time, and stamina, especially in those last 3 to 4 years of life as we near the terminal decline or kind of the last couple of years towards death. But the silver lining here is that a lot of these people also kind of give up on exercising and maintaining lifestyle. And so when people maintain significant exercise throughout their lives, they remain mentally quicker. They build and maintain neural connections. They stay away from obesity and heart disease. There are an unbelievable amount of benefits to exercise, and it's not just looking better and feeling better, right? You will do those things, but it's also about maintaining your brain, right? It's amazing the connection between those things. So cognitive changes into early, middle, and old age. In early adulthood, we see pretty rapid neural processing, right? The early adulthood, I feel pretty confident in my like peaking my neural ability here, right? But over the course of middle adulthood into old age, we begin to lose some of that. Right. And into later adulthood, we see even more slowing of neural processing, and even more accidents occur for people after 75, significantly more accidents. And that's, like car accidents, which kind of demands that you are able to quickly react and pay attention to things. Then we also see atrophy of frontal lobe and memory areas being damaged. Again, exercise, really important to maintain those things. Right, you see, so a couple different things, right? Like, different examples here. So age groups, 40 to 50, 50 to 60, 60 to 70, 70 to 90, and how they are able to remember names, and right, like what their chances are of remembering something, right? So we see that decline over the course of their lives, right? 18 to 39, it's at its highest. By the time you're about 40, it slowly starts to decline, and the ability to remember those things. Recognition is different though, right? So like recognition actually increases over life, right? The number of words are recognized, but be able to recall things. And those are two different things, right? The difference between a multiple choice question and a short answer question, right? If you can, your gut gives you that recognition. You're like, oh yeah, I do know this answer. But if you're trying to recall and bring words out from your memory, maybe not as good. And that fades even more over life. right? So where that really can start to fade is with dementia. This is a loss of general cognitive functioning. It's not just memory. It's thinking, remembering, and reasoning, as well as some behavioral abilities. And so it really, really interferes with your day-to-day existence and with those of your family. If any of you, like me, have gone through kind of watching someone in your family, maybe a grandparent, go through dementia, it's really tough watching that. Because it really, they don't just, it's really sad thinking about their own experience, but also the impact it has on family members around them, those that have to really, really make sure that they are taken care of in some way, because it's a really difficult disease. So what we see and what's the cause of this can be a number of things, but what's really happening is that our neurons are just not functioning appropriately. We're beginning to lose neural networks. We lose connections with our brain cells. And recall, neurons slowly die. We also have neurogenesis throughout our life. Our brain is always killing neurons and rebuilding new ones. But what's happening with dementia is your brain is losing neurons and you're not rebuilding them, and you're losing them way too quickly, right? And this doesn't happen very often to young people, but it happens way more often as people age. It's not something that's going to happen to everyone. On average, most people don't go through dementia, right? They have the natural process of losing cognitive functions like rapid fire memory and fluid intelligence and quick reasoning, but not basic functioning skills, right? To remember, the ability to reason through things and think and hold conversations, right? That's not something that's going to happen for most. So Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause of this. It's what most people identify with dementia, but there are plenty of other things as well, right? Like vascular dementia, in which a series of strokes can cause this. Just physical brain damage can cause this. So lots of different things can also get in the way here. So Alzheimer's specifically, we see the damage appear primarily in the hippocampus first, which is where you first notice it because people begin to forget little things. It should be the first clue. Some people can't recall things. And recall, our brains really take care of us. They protect us. And so when you can't forget things, remember, think of like the left and the right split brain people, how their brains would justify things that the other half of their body would do, even when it didn't make sense, even when they couldn't process it. Our brains kind of do the same thing with Alzheimer's or with dementia. If we forget something, we can count on our brain to make up a reason for why we forgot it, or maybe like, oh, I knew that. Right. Oh yeah, I knew that. I'm sorry. I was just forgot about it. You'll say something wrong and be like, I knew that was your name. I was just testing you. And so it's really tough to oftentimes notice this, but it becomes more and more aware, more and more present, or very obvious over the course of the process. And you can see what that looks like. It's pretty devastating, right? Like a healthy brain, we see the white matter and gray matter, and then we see the decay of that in advanced Alzheimer's. And we see the same thing in the PET scan. The red being the active areas burning glucose in the PET scan, blue areas not really active. The brain is more or less not doing much at all, right? It's a very basic level functions. This is more the internal portions of the brain that are working. Here we have the entire outer portions, the like conscious portions of the brain really working as well. It is irreversible. See, it starts out with memory and then eventually carries out and kind of destroys the rest of the brain as well. Most people, this is very late, but it can happen in the early life, right? Less than 10% of cases can happen in people's 30s, and this is almost always only with a genetic component, right? It means that they had this genetic component and it was triggered by some form of epigenetic cause. Social development, the thing about the Erikson stages here, early and young adulthood, we see that intimacy versus isolation, right? This is that stage in your really late college or college through early 20s where people are kind of pairing off. They're finding intimate and close relationships, right? Do they maintain their friendships with previous friends? Do they find themselves kind of alone, right? Or have they paired off and gotten married, started a family? Or are they feeling more and more isolated away from their friends who may be pairing off and doing that? In middle adulthood, you have that like midlife crisis, generativity versus stagnation, where you want to make a difference in the world. You want to make sure you're making a difference in the world. But many people feel stagnant. They're like, I've been doing this job for 15 years, and what good is it? What am I doing with my life? I should go and do something else. I should go work for a charity. I should go and become a teacher. I don't know what they should do, but this is that kind of that recognition in the middle 20 or so years of your adulthood. It's like, am I comfortable with what I'm doing? And then finally, late adulthood, in the last 10 to 20 years, integrity versus despair. Do you feel good about your life, right? Do you feel confident that you lived a good life? And can you march towards death with integrity? To greet it like an old friend, as to quote Albus Dumbledore, or do you would you look at this as despair, looking back on your life, and panic, right, and think I didn't do this appropriately, right? Something's wrong, right? So that adulthood stages oftentimes, and this is very like culturally defined here, this term social clock. These are the kind of culturally preferred times of social events. For instance, marriage. Think about 100 years ago, the social clock said that you should be married by your 20s. Now you're crazy if you're getting married at 20, right? Most people look at people who get married in their 20s. I got married in my young 20s, so I don't actually think they're crazy. But we look at them as like, oh, I can't believe that now it's like 27 to 30 when most people are getting married. Right, midlife crisis 40 to 60. Now I'm seeing with millennials, most of the data, people are pointing out and saying that like, well, midlife crisis actually is now coming in like your 30s, and people are panicking and thinking they need to change. So this social clock kind of changes piece by piece. Yep. Let me see what else. Yeah, and then ways to age appropriately, right? This is one of the great goals of my life, is thinking about how I can maintain physical abilities and maintain relationships, right? Just like be happy in general, what that looks like, and with all things bio, psycho, social, right? Right, you've got to maintain appropriate nutrition, and then hope that you don't have some of it's luck, right? Some of it's genes. Do you have any of those genetic predispositions? Psychologically, right? How do you feel? How are you thinking, right? Your cognitive abilities. Are you framing things appropriately? Are you seeing friends? Are you physically and mentally active? Right? Or are you just sitting around the house, right? While doing Sudoku puzzles and waiting for people to come see you? And then social culture influence, support from family and friends is huge. Having meaningful activities to do every day. This is one of the most important things that have been connected to it. There is a fascinating, I don't know the numbers exactly, but it's like the Christmas effect, where we see the number of people that die on Christmas from natural causes or older age is extremely low, but the number of people that die on the 26th is way higher than normal. Meaning that to some extent, so we can psychologically kind of hold off death, right? Like, yes, you can't hold that off forever, but people, when they have something to live for and they have something to look forward to, are much more likely to hold on. And for when people feel that that is gone or behind them, they may be more likely to like let go, right? So the way we phrase and think about the things around us is really, really important. So yeah, and that's it. So that is the end of our unit here. So hopefully you've got a general idea now of kind of the different stages of development. Remember, these are all kind of theoretical stages, right? They have all been debated. They were initially set up and studied primarily on Western civilizations or societies, and mostly white men. So they're not perfect, right? They've been debated and challenged by people like Carol Gilligan over the course of the last 50, 60 years. And we'll probably continue to learn about these things, as with a lot of things in psychology. But hopefully you've got a good understanding of that by now. I will see you all when I see you. Much love.